everybody, I'm not feeling that great this week, but I really wanted to get out a video this week anyways. So today we're just going to sit down and chat about some of the reasons why I decided to go with a front lacing corset as my first custom corset, and why I wouldn't actually recommend that for other people who are looking for a corset with high reductions, like more than 6 or 7 or 8 inches. Now, my first custom corset I purchased, I think, in early 2010, and it was made by an engineer out of the UK who happened to make corsets in their spare time, and they don't make corsets anymore though. But at the time, I was still in school, and I had to sit on a lot of those hard, flat-backed seats. And I figured that if, of course, it had no laces in the back, then there wouldn't be any sort of annoying lump from the knot and the laces when I leaned against the back of the chair, basically. And I also figured it would be more comfortable to sleep in because, again, I would be able to sleep on my back with no annoying lump underneath me. And I figured if I wanted to loosen the corset, I wouldn't have to sit up or I wouldn't have to get out of bed, and my sleep wouldn't be disrupted because I could lie on my back and I can easily access the laces in front of me if I needed to loosen or tighten the corset throughout the night. And there was also just the novelty and the rarity of having a custom front lacing corset because I had seldom seen anybody else wearing one at the time. And even though I was able to lace back lacing corsets at the time very well, I had still owned back lacing off the rack corsets and my own handmade corsets at the time as well. I had to admit that it was fairly attractive to, not have to look behind me in the mirror and put my arms behind my back and lace up the corset that way. If I was groggy at 6 a.m. when I was waking up, I didn't even have to open my eyes if I wanted to just, get up and tighten my corset and go. I also remember that I was dealing with some anxiety in school as well for various reasons, and I figured that if I ever felt claustrophobic, it would be faster and easier to cut the laces if it were in front of the corset as opposed to in the back. I also worked in a microbiology lab at the time, and I was around open flames, and I had to deal with corrosive chemicals, and even though our lab coats had fire-resistant coating, I figured that if there were ever a fire or something caustic was spilled on me, I would need to disrobe very quickly, and once again, cutting the laces would be a lot faster and easier if it was in the front of the corset as opposed to in the back. So that was my logic at the time. Those were my reasons and my rationale for wanting a front lacing corset and thinking that it would be better for my lifestyle. But after about 6 months of waist training, I began to realize that it was not quite as practical as I had hoped. So some of the reasons why I would not recommend a front lacing corset for tight lacing, especially very high reductions of tight lacing or daily waist training, there are several reasons. If I remember correctly, my corset only had flat steels in the center front, and it was spiral steel boned all the way around, even in this center back of the corset, which I thought I would love because, it could curve with my lumbar spine and it would be very flexible if I ever needed to arch my back. But the corset pattern was drafted such that it curved slightly too much in the back for me, and that led to some lumbar pain, especially when I laced down too much, because it was trying to create a curve where my spine normally is. So it caused me to arch my back in a natural way. And even beyond that, I felt like there was a lot of pressure on that vertebra that was right underneath the waistline of the corset. And it made my booty look amazing because it was forcing me into a sway back position, but it was not a healthy posture and it was not comfortable. Another thing about it, and again, this might be more the pattern than the actual construction of it, but it was a conical rib cage because I was interested in training my floating ribs. But where you have a back lacing corset with a conical rib cage, it tends to put gentle pressure kind of more on the front of the floating ribs as opposed to the back. And my back lacing corset put all the pressure on the back of my floating ribs as opposed to the front. And it felt very awkward. So when talking about torque or something, if you imagine, this is like a door, and this is close to the hinge, obviously, and then this would be kind of like the doorknob, it would be a lot easier to swing the door if you are pushing from here as opposed to like pushing from here. Because of the, sorry about my nails, guys, I haven't done that in a long time, but you know, you get more torque if you are putting force closer to the edge of the door as opposed to closer to the hinge. And I felt like it was similar for my ribs, my floating ribs as well, because in the back by the spine, the ribs are attached by the costal joints. Whereas in the front, the floating ribs are not attached to anything. They're not attached to the sternum. They're free floating. So I felt like if the corset were placing more gentle, consistent pressure from the front, it would have been a bit easier to train my floating ribs to respond to the compression, as opposed to putting all the pressure here in the back close to my spine. It felt uncomfortable, and I didn't feel that it was very efficient. So hopefully that explanation makes sense to some people. Now, if you are a fluffier person and you have a lot of padding over your rib cage, such that if you even wear a straight rib corset, it's really only affecting the adipose tissue around your rib cage and not actually putting pressure on your rib cage yet, you might not notice the difference in how and where exactly the more the pressure is placed. But I personally did, and yeah, it really wasn't comfortable, and I could not tolerate it for long periods of time. I also kind of felt that there was more pressure placed on my retroperitoneal cavity, like just kind of in the back, as opposed to a lot of the support and pressure being placed on my front at the abdomen. So you know how sometimes when you're wearing a regular back lacing corset, you sometimes get the venous fold where your back muscles just kind of create that little cleavage in the center back. That was happening to me, except in the front. So the corset was kind of pushing all of my flesh forward, which is not a great idea. Now, if you've seen my Corsets and Organs video from like more than 7 years ago, you already know this information, but one big reason why traditional back lacing corsets are effective is because the majority of the pressure is placed on the peritoneal cavity, which primarily consists of hollow membranous organs like your stomach and your intestines. Now, they can be full of food and waste and air, but they can be hollow if you haven't eaten in a while or if you tend to have small meals, and they can easily flatten and move out of the way. And these membranous organs are moving all the time, and you're not even noticing it during peristalsis, when you're digesting your food, when you're doing yoga or doing any sort of positions where you're bending at the waist, if you are growing a baby inside of you. So your organs can very easily flatten and compress, and as long as you have soft stools, your bowel movements can still move along very easily. Long story short, your hollow membranous organs like your stomach and your intestines are all placed in the front of your body, and they move readily. Whereas with a front lacing corset, I felt like it was putting more pressure on the back of my body, on the retroperitoneal area, where there are many solid organs like your kidneys. And so it was not comfortable. I don't believe that it was healthy. And so by putting so much pressure on the back, it actually caused my tummy to pooch out a little bit. And you can see that in my self-lacing video that as I was lacing up the corset, my tummy was kind of bulging a little bit out from underneath the laces. And in retrospect, that was really not good. It's really hard to prove any of this unless I actually went and had scans of how my body is affected with a front lacing corset versus a back lacing corset using the exact same pattern and at the same waist reduction. And I'm obviously not set up to do something like that, but hopefully my subjective experiences are still helpful to some of you. My corset also did not come with a modesty panel to support my abdomen in the front. And I thought at the time it would be okay because the bones sandwiching the grommets were flat steel. But really, I did need more support in the front, especially because my natural waist was around 28 inches and my corset was a size 20 if I were to lace it closed. Now, I remember I was lacing to 22.5 inches over the corset, so it was probably 21.5 inches under the corset. So I was lacing with a 6.5 inch reduction in my natural waist at the time. I had intended to train my waist so that I would eventually be able to lace closed that corset corset so that I wouldn't have any, pooching out from the front laces. But it actually took several years and the purchase of a better quality and back lacing corset for me to reach my goal of closing a size 20 corset. In the meantime, while I had this front lacing corset, I needed more support in the front. And so I ended up making a boned modesty panel to help support my abdomen and keep it flat. It was really ugly. It was made from a super old, I think it was like a camp girdle from the 70s, made from like a lemon yellow canvas, but it did its job. And you can see that in one of my older videos where I was adjusting my waist training regimen. Another reason why a front lacing corset was not the most practical for me personally was that it turns out I prefer to sleep on my stomach. So I always fall asleep on my back, but more often than not, I wake up on my stomach. So it was actually more comfortable for me to have a very flat front in my corset if I were going to sleep in my corset at all. These days, more often than not, I don't sleep in my corset. So once again, if you are considering a waist training corset that you will be wearing for long periods of time, I think a back lacing corset would be more appropriate. It provides the proper support and compression from the front of the body and not the back. And if you are planning on training your floating ribs, I think that it's easier to coax your ribs from the front of the body as opposed to the back. And same if you are tight lacing or lacing down more than 6 or 7 or 8 inches. It will likely be more comfortable if you are wearing a normal back lacing corset as opposed to a front lacing corset. Now, if you're wearing a light reduction corset, say not more than about 2 to 4 inches of waist reduction for medical purposes or posture support, then front lacing would probably be okay. If you have a hernia, like an umbilical hernia, I would not advise having a front lacing corset because it's basically increasing your intra-abdominal pressure everywhere except right at the belly button. And so it might actually make it worse. Many people who need to wear a girdle for an umbilical hernia before they can have their surgery scheduled, that girdle is designed to put more pressure on the front of the abdomen. If you have mobility issues with your shoulders or strength issues and you're not able to lace up your corset fully from the back, then fan lacing might be an option for you because then you just have to grab 2 straps on the sides of your body and pull, and it tightens all the laces at the same time. If you are making your own corset and you have no access or funds for a front busk, then you can try a metal zip in the front of your corset, or you can try a closed front corset with regular laces in the back, or you can even make a corset that is laced both in the front and back. A corset that is laced in both the front of the corset and the back is better than just having a closed back corset with the lacing only at the front, because you're able to, say, pull in the front by 2 inches and then pull in the back by 2 inches and keep alternating front and back so that you're bringing in each side of the corset laterally and placing pretty even pressure on either side of your body without creating any sort of weird torque at the back of the body and pushing all of your organs forward and causing your tummy to pooch out. Just remember that if you are wearing a corset with laces both at the front and the back, and the front of your corset has any kind of lacing gap, then it's best to have a stiffened or boned modesty panel in the front to support the abdomen. Later on, I hope to make videos on fan lacing corsets, what they're good for, what they're not good for, and maybe a tutorial on how to convert a regular off-the-rack corset into a fan lacing corset. I'm also talking with a friend on making a collab video full of helpful information, like how to put on and take off your corset if you use a wheelchair or you have issues with strength or mobility. So I hope to share more of that with you later. So let me know in a comment down below whether you would like to see those types of videos in the future, and feel free to leave any questions if you have any. Make sure you subscribe for future videos, and remember to hit that notification bell because apparently my videos aren't going out to all my subscribers unless you have the notifications on. And so thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.